Well, the good thing is that everybody's come up healthy. We've got a complete squad to pick from. We've got everybody in full training, and everybody's healthy. So that's one positive to come out of the last game.
We will go to questions in the room before we head online to Australia. Australia, please use the raise your hand function and I will come to you. But we'll kick it off with you, Lucas.
Tom, how's the energy there? Any sort of energy preparation for this game after what happened?
No, the players have picked themselves up pretty well. You know, to be honest, the energy was good going into the game. Then you go into the game and obviously we didn't really, we didn't play very well. We didn't play with the energy that we normally play with. So I really, I'll be honest, I didn't really predict that when I was watching us in training. But, it happens. Players are travelling long distances. They've come off games. Some haven't been playing games. So this tournament at this time is quite hard to predict, sort of where your players are at and how they're actually going to turn up for the game.
You spoke about after the game the other day that there would be changes
Yeah.
in the lineup. Are you expecting it to be wholesale, or are you going to try and do it half and half?
Yeah, well, coaches often talk about wholesale changes, but when you actually look at it, nobody actually makes wholesale changes. But we're making a few changes. Yeah, we're definitely changing the lineup and bringing a few different players in. Again, just to, as I said before this tournament, one of the key things here is for us to try and give game time to players. And it's important when you're doing that you start players as well, so that you put them in that environment straight away. So we will be making a few changes to the starting team. Well, they certainly injected a lot of energy into the team, and I think there's a good chance that some of those players who came on will be starting tomorrow.
Spoke with Caitlin earlier, and she was talking about her role in her playing up front. She then moved to wing. How good is it to have players as versatile as Caitlin and Mary, but then also conversely to that, how hard is it to fit them in when they can all play to each other's position?
Well, it's not hard to fit them in, not players of that stature and that quality, but someone like particularly Caitlin. Caitlin's a kind of player that can play anywhere in the field, and when she came in as a young player and played in the 2011 World Cup, she played as a right back. So she's someone who can just go out in the football field and play wherever. She's got all the ingredients that a really good football player has, and Mary as well. Mary's just an outstanding talent, and I think the key thing that we need to do with Mary is find a way to make sure that we get her in the game more often and get her to impact the games.
How do you do that?
That's a good question. I was hoping you might tell me. It's just, look, a lot of it's down to, one of the challenges that you have these days with national teams is you get no time to work with them, and you get no time for players then to blend and work together. So one of the key things when you look at good teams is that players that play together and are kind of on the same page. But if you don't get time to work at that and train at that, it takes a little bit of time for that to happen. So hopefully that's something that will evolve in the team, and then Mary will become an even more significant player than she is now.
Any other questions from the floor? Otherwise we'll head online. All right, Anna Harrington, first off the cab.
Oh, lucky me. First cab off the rank even.
What can I say? Always start at the top.
Exactly. Tom, I guess it's a very proud team. I know you said some of the defending the other day was un-Australian, and I think even Ellie said on the broadcast that it was bad. How have they sort of reflected on that? And you mentioned they picked themselves up. Just in terms of that desperation, that grit that I'm sure a lot of them define themselves by and will want to show against the US. Well,
the thing is, the teams obviously, the team themselves had a meeting after the game, so they sort of had a chat amongst themselves, which is a positive thing. But I'll know more tomorrow night, to be honest. And I think football's a funny game. You have good days and you have bad days, and the key thing for us as a team, and particularly an Australian team, is important to put yesterday's or the game before behind us and really go into this game with a much more positive and a much more aggressive attitude. I'd like to say we'll definitely do that. I hope we do that. You know, the team wants to do that. The players want to do it. It's something the team's done in the past. So, you know, I think the key thing for us tomorrow night is to make sure that we go out there and we just really turn up. And that's the key to our performance.
And just on the US, you mentioned before that there'll be changes. We've seen, especially that first game against Colombia, Emma Hayes has turned to some younger players, that youthful enthusiasm. Your thoughts on them, Tom? And also, does that sort of enable you as well to throw a few more of these younger, less experienced players in and maybe go toe-to-toe, because it's sort of youthful enthusiasm against youthful enthusiasm?
There's always a balance, so it's getting the mix right. So the key thing for us, and I said in this tournament, is to try and give exposure for players that are not regulars in the team, and that's what we tend to do during the tournament. How much we can do that depends on a whole lot of factors, but it's certainly our intent to get some of those younger players out there and playing in the team, whether they come off the bench or whether they start in the team. So the simple answer to your question is yes, that's what we want to do. You know, at the same time, you have to look at putting out a balanced team where you don't. You know, I think if you look back a couple, 2 or 3 years ago when Australia put out a very inexperienced team against Spain, and I don't think that was a really valuable exercise at the time. So it's getting the right mix is what's really important, because you don't just want to throw young players in if that mix isn't right, because you're kind of exposing them and you're potentially doing them some damage at the same time.
Heading on to Emma, a question and a follow-up.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, Tom, Erin, and Mark. I'm away today, so I'm third cab off the rank for News Corp here. So
there you go.
that chat that the players had the other night that you mentioned just before, was that just amongst themselves after you and the staff had left the room, or?
Yeah, they had it themselves. We weren't there. So.
Yeah.
And that's important. It's important for players to get together and work some things out themselves.
You're hoping that they really thrash some stuff out there, and because as you said, it wasn't the typical, especially defensive effort that we're used to seeing from the Matildas. You're really hoping that there were probably some hard truths spoken there.
Oh, I don't know if it's necessarily hard truth. It's just, I think everybody, looking at themselves and looking around the team and being able to sort of, face a performance honestly and look at themselves, and also, first and foremost, it's like everybody. As a coach, you look at yourself after a game, and have you selected things correctly? Have you put out the right tactics, etc., etc. So we hope when the players get in a room together that they're honest enough to look at themselves and to look at what they want to do as a team and to regroup, and hopefully now we'll take that into the second game and put in a better performance.
Yeah. Just a quick one on Mary too. You talked about, how valuable she is kind of on the ball. Is it really hard without Sam there and you talked about balance in the team, without Sam to get that right balance with Mary in the team? Are you forced maybe at the moment to play her further up front than you necessarily want to?
No, not really, because and I think I've probably said this before, I'm still trying to work out myself where the best position is for Mary. I think she's much better in an advanced role in some capacity, and it's us having the ability to get her and herself to get herself in the game a little bit more. But if you look at the game the other night, we'd never really had a foothold in the game to be able to do that. So the first and foremost thing we need to do is we need to actually get in the game itself. And then when we do that, she's the kind of player that can really produce that extra special pass or that little bit of magic that either creates a goal or scores a goal for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
We'll head back to Anna.
Yeah, Tom, just your impressions on the US. Obviously, I think I mentioned before, quite a different lineup the other day, but they're still the Olympic champions. There's obviously different players of quality. What have you made of them, and what have you sort of going to get right against them?
Well, we've got to get lots of things right. As I say, the first thing is we need to be ready to go out there and compete and deal with their intensity and their quality of play. I mean, I think the thing that the US has done now is that they built up not just a starting team, but a real quality squad where even if they have 5 or 6 key players missing, they've still got they've still got an outstanding team. And I think the NWSL has helped that along, probably because a lot of players now are coming into that at an earlier age and becoming professionals at an earlier age. So they're a very formidable team at the moment. So the first thing and the first and foremost thing is that we need to go out and compete. That's basically what we need to do. And then if we do that, we need to then have the confidence to play the kind of football that we're capable of.
Final 2 questions.
Tom, you spoke about the other day about the different styles that each of your opponents will play in this tournament. What styles does the US play? That means that you can sort of benefit from different styles. Are you likely to see different formation?
No, not necessarily a different formation or a different setup or different tactics, but they do play, obviously, a little bit. Everybody plays a little bit different to Japan. But the US and the Australian styles, in general, over history, have been to a degree quite similar. And if you look historically, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, most of the games between the US and the Aussies have been quite tight and very competitive, because I think we're two very similar nations in many ways.